The wind howled across the dry plains of Silver Creek, carrying dust and whispers through the quiet town as the last light of the sun faded behind the hills. It was the kind of night that made a man feel alone, no matter how strong he thought he was. Inside a small wooden cabin at the edge of town, Daniel Hayes stood near the door, his hat still in his hands, unsure if he should stay or walk right back out into the cold. He had faced storms, outlaws, and hunger in his life. But this was something else entirely. Across the room, sitting stiffly on the edge of the bed, was his new bride, Clara Whitmore. She looked small in that moment, smaller than he remembered from the church just hours earlier. Her hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale. Her breathing was uneven, like she was trying to hold something back. But Daniel cleared his throat, shifting his weight. "You don't have to be scared," he said quietly, his voice rough from years of dust and silence. Clara didn't look at him right away. Instead, she stared down at the wooden floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "It hurts, just thinking about it," she said. Daniel froze. The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile at the same time. He took a slow step forward, careful, like he was approaching a frightened animal. "This don't have to be anything you don't want," he replied. "We got time." That made her finally look up. Her eyes were glossy, filled with something deeper than fear. There was pain there, yes, but also something else, something that made Daniel's chest tighten. "I've never done this before," she admitted softly. I don't even know how to be a wife." Daniel swallowed hard. He had expected quiet, maybe even distance, but not this kind of honesty, not this kind of vulnerability. He moved closer, stopping a few feet away, giving her space. "You don't gotta prove anything tonight," he said. "We can sit, talk, or I can sleep on the floor if that makes it easier." For a moment, Clara said nothing. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft creak of the cabin as the wind pushed against its walls. Then slowly, she stood up. Her dress shifted softly as she moved, her hands trembling just enough for Daniel to notice. She took one step toward him, then another. Each step looked like it cost her something. Daniel didn't move, didn't breathe. He just watched. Clara stopped in front of him, but close enough now that he could see the faint freckles across her cheeks, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding back tears. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. Daniel frowned slightly. "That a bad thing?" She shook her head. "No, it's just, I thought you'd be colder, harder." A faint, almost sad smile touched his lips. "Life tried to make me that way," he said. "Guess it didn't finish the job." That made something shift in her expression. Something softened. Clara looked down for a second, then reached out with shaking hands. Daniel tensed slightly as her fingers brushed against his belt. The simple touch sent a jolt through him, not of desire, but of surprise. He hadn't expected her to close the distance, hadn't expected her to make the first move. He looked at her carefully. You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. "Steady." Clara hesitated. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across her face again. But then she took a breath, deep and slow, like she was gathering courage from somewhere deep inside her. "I don't want to be afraid forever," she said. Her voice was still soft, still unsure, but there was something new in it now. Determination. Daniel studied her face, searching for any sign that she was forcing herself. All he saw was fear, and bravery standing right beside it. He gently reached up, placing his hand over hers. Not to guide her, not to push, just to stop her for a moment. "Hey," he said quietly. She looked up at him. "If we do this, it's slow," he said. "And the second you feel uncomfortable, we stop. No questions, no pressure." Clara blinked, surprised. You'd really do that?" Daniel gave a small nod. "I gave my word when I married you," he said. "That means something to me." For the first time that night, something close to a real smile touched her lips. Not big, not bright, but real. She looked down at their hands again. Then slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. But instead of moving forward, he did something that caught her completely off guard. He stepped back, just one step, giving her space again. "We start with trust," he said. "Everything else comes after." Clara stared at him, her eyes widening slightly. It wasn't what she expected. Not from a man like him. Not from a night like this. The fear inside her didn't disappear. But it changed. It softened. And for the first time since the wedding, she didn't feel trapped. She felt safe. Outside, the wind kept howling across the plains. But inside that small cabin, something quiet and powerful had begun. Not passion. Not yet. Something stronger. Something that would change both of their lives in ways neither of them could yet understand. And Daniel Hayes had no idea that this quiet, trembling woman, standing in front of him, was hiding a secret that would test everything he believed about trust, love, and what it truly meant to protect someone. And by morning, nothing in Silver Creek would ever be the same. The night did not end the way Clara thought it would. It ended in silence. Daniel had stretched out a spare blanket near the fireplace, his back against the wall, his hat resting over his face. He did not try to touch her, but he did not try to move closer. He kept his word. Clara lay on the bed, staring at the wooden ceiling above her, listening to the steady crackle of the fire. She had braced herself for fear, for pressure, for something to be taken. Instead, she felt something she did not know how to name. Safety. And that scared her more than anything else, because safety meant she could finally let her guard down. And if she did that, the truth would come out. She turned her head slightly and looked at Daniel's shadow near the hearth. He was awake. She could tell by the way his chest rose and fell, steady but alert. "You're not sleeping," she whispered. "Neither are you," he answered without lifting his hat. The quiet stretched again. Clara's fingers twisted in the quilt. "Why did you marry me?" she asked suddenly. Daniel shifted slightly, lowering the hat from his face so he could look at her. "That's a strange question for a wedding night. I need to know." Her voice was not soft now. It was tight, controlled, like someone standing on the edge of something dangerous. Daniel took a slow breath. "Because you answered my ad," he said. "Because you looked me in the eye at the train station. Because you didn't look scared of the land." Clara swallowed. "And if I told you I was scared of something else?" Daniel sat up fully now, his eyes adjusting to the dim firelight. "Then I'd ask you what it is." She pushed herself up slowly, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. "You ever heard the name Thomas Reed?" she asked. The change in the air was immediate. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Everyone's heard of Thomas Reed," he said carefully. "Owns half the cattle between here and Red Bluff." Clara nodded faintly. He owned more than cattle. Daniel's eyes darkened. "What are you saying?" Clara looked down at her hands. "My father owed him money," she said. "A lot of it. Drought took our crops. We were drowning." Her breathing became uneven again, but she forced herself to continue. Mr. Reed made an offer. Said he'd clear the debt if I agreed to work in his household. Daniel's hands curled into fists at his sides. Work, he repeated slowly. Clara gave a small, humorless laugh. That's what he called it. The fire popped loudly, making them both flinch. He never touched me, she added quickly, her voice shaking now. But he made it clear what would happen eventually. Daniel stood up, not suddenly, not wildly, but with a quiet kind of fury that felt heavier than shouting. And you ran, he said. Clara nodded. The mail-order bride ad was my way out. You were my escape. The words hung in the air. Daniel absorbed them slowly. So, I was a plan, he said. Yes. And now? Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining in the firelight. Now I don't know. Daniel turned away for a moment, staring into the flames. He had married her believing he was offering protection, but he had not realized how deep that protection needed to go. Outside, a horse suddenly neighed sharply. Both of them froze. Daniel's head snapped toward the door. That wasn't his horse. He moved quickly now, grabbing the rifle that leaned beside the hearth. Clara's heart began pounding in her chest. Daniel, she whispered. He held up a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. Then came the sound. Boots on the porch. Slow, heavy, deliberate. A knock followed. Not polite, not gentle. 3 hard thuds against the wood. Daniel's jaw clenched. Open up, a deep voice called from outside. I know she's in there. Clara's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Thomas Reed. Daniel glanced back at her, and in that look, everything changed. He understood now. The fear, the trembling, the way she had touched his belt earlier, testing strength. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of being taken back. Stay behind me, Daniel said quietly. The knock came again, harder this time. You married stolen property, Cowboy, Reed called out. That girl belongs to me. Daniel's hand tightened around the rifle. Clara stepped forward despite herself. I'm not property, she whispered, but the words felt small against the weight of Reed's voice outside. Daniel moved to the door, but did not open it. She's my wife, he said loudly, and she stays here. A laugh came from the other side. You think a preacher's paper means more than a signed debt? Clara's legs felt weak. Daniel looked back at her again, and something passed between them. This was no longer about a wedding night. This was about freedom and blood. Reed's voice dropped lower. Open the door, Daniel, or I'll make this real unpleasant. Daniel lifted the rifle slightly, steady and calm. Then you best be ready, he replied. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying dust across the porch. Clara's heart hammered so hard, she thought it might break through her ribs. She had run once. She had hidden once. But this time, she wasn't alone. And as Thomas Reed's shadow shifted under the crack of the door, Clara Whitmore understood something for the first time. Tonight wasn't about fear. It was about choosing who she belonged to, and for the first time in her life. She chose herself. The wind hit the cabin walls like it wanted in. Dust scraped across the porch. The lantern outside flickered. Thomas Reed stood on the other side of that thin wooden door, and for the first time since she had left her father's farm, Clara did not feel like running. Daniel stood between her and the door, rifle steady, shoulders squared. Last chance, Reed called. You hand her over, and I forget this ever happened. Clara stepped forward. Daniel felt it before he saw it. Her presence moved closer behind him. "Stay back," he whispered. "Oh, no," she said. Her voice was shaking, but it was not weak. Daniel turned slightly, enough to see her face. She was pale, terrified, but her eyes were clear. She walked up beside him, not behind him, beside him. Reed laughed from the porch. "Well now," he said, "there she is." Daniel did not open the door, but he spoke louder. "She's not stepping foot outside." "She owes me," Reed barked back. "Her father signed papers." Clara felt the old fear try to rise in her chest, the memory of that kitchen table, her father's trembling hand, the ink drying on something she had never agreed to. Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts. "She don't owe you her life." There was movement outside, another pair of boots. Reed hadn't come alone. Clara's breath caught. Daniel heard it too. He lowered his voice. "Clara, listen to me." She looked at him. "If things go bad, you run out the back and head for the creek," he said. "Don't stop." Her head shook instantly. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to." "No." Her voice broke, but she stood firm. "I ran before. I hid before. I won't do it again." The silence outside grew heavier. Then Reed's voice turned colder. "You think marriage changes anything?" he said. "You're still mine." That word snapped something inside Clara. Before Daniel could stop her, she moved to the door. She unlatched it. Daniel grabbed her wrist, but she pulled free. The door swung open. The wind rushed in. Thomas Reed stood there in a long, dark coat, hat low over his eyes. Two men stood behind him, hands resting near their belts. Reed's eyes locked on Clara. For a second, everything else disappeared, and she saw the same look she had seen in her father's kitchen. Ownership, control, expectation. But something was different now. She was not the same girl. "You don't own me," she said. Her voice carried in the wind. Reed smiled slowly. "Your father sold you." "My father was desperate," she shot back. "And you took advantage." Reed's jaw tightened. "That's business." Daniel stepped forward, rifle angled, but not raised. "She's not livestock." Reed ignored him. He took one step toward Clara. "You're coming with me," he said, and he reached for her arm. Daniel lifted the rifle instantly, but Clara moved first. She stepped back on her own. "You touch me," she said, her voice rising, "and every man in this town will hear what you tried to do." Reed laughed. "They won't care." "They will," she replied, and her voice steadied now, "because I won't be quiet." The two men behind Reed shifted uneasily. They had heard rumors about how Reed treated debt, about girls who worked in his household and then disappeared. Clara saw it in their faces. Doubt. Reed noticed it too. His smile faded. "You think anyone believes you?" he asked. "I don't need everyone," she said. "Just enough." Daniel stepped up beside her fully now, not shielding her, standing with her. "She's my wife," he said firmly, "and she ain't going anywhere." Reed looked between them. Something changed in his expression. He had expected tears, fear, begging. He had not expected this. Clara met his stare without looking away. "You don't scare me anymore," she said quietly. That was the truth. Her heart was racing. Her hands were trembling. But the fear did not control her. Reed's eyes hardened. He glanced at Daniel's rifle, then at the town behind him. Lights flickered in nearby windows. People were watching. Doors had cracked open. Whispers traveled fast in Silver Creek. Reed spat in the dirt. "This ain't over," he said. "It is for tonight," Daniel replied calmly. Reed hesitated. Then he stepped back. He tipped his hat mockingly. "You'll regret this," he muttered. And then he turned. His boots thudded down the porch steps. The two men followed. Within seconds, they disappeared into the wind and dust. The street slowly returned to quiet. Daniel kept the rifle raised until he was sure. Then he lowered it. Clara's legs gave out, not from weakness, from release. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground. He pulled her close, while her face pressed against his chest. She was shaking again. But this time, it was not fear. It was relief. "You were brave," he whispered. "So were you," she answered. They stood there for a long moment in the doorway, the wind still blowing, the dust still moving. But something inside Clara had shifted forever. She had faced the man who thought he owned her, and she had not bowed. Inside the cabin, Daniel closed the door gently. He set the rifle down. Then he turned to her. "No one owns you," he said. She stepped closer. This time, there was no fear in her touch. When her hand found his, it did not tremble. "I know," she said softly. The fire crackled behind them. The storm outside slowly faded into a distant hum. Clara looked up at him, not as an escape, not as protection, but as a choice. "I'm not here because I had to be," she said. "I'm here because I want to be." Daniel's breath slowed. The weight of the night settled into something warmer, something earned. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Slow, careful. "Then we start tomorrow," he said. "On our terms." Clara nodded, and for the first time since she stepped off that train, the future didn't feel like a trap. It felt like open land. And this time, she would walk it by choice.